Like a long dormant fusion reactor, one can feel the hum of something coming back online, slowly but surely resonating with a forgotten power. Mechwarrior 5 Mercenaries, a game released in 2019, marked the first single-player Mechwarrior experience the franchise had seen since 2002. Over the course of this 17-year period, there was a siren's call seemingly to bring the property back to where it began, away from the Mechwarrior Online model. Mercenaries got off to a bit of a rocky start, but the lumbering monstrosity that is the most prominent depiction of Battletech in digital form has found its legs once again. And now it thunders across the video gaming space once more. But it did seem for some time that support for this game would come to an end. Even I had assumed that Rise of Rosselhaig would be the game's final DLC. In recent days, as of the making of this video, the Dragon's Gambit has been released, a DLC after Rise of Rosselhaig. There were rumblings of a new single-player, standalone experience coming at some point after this as well. That particular new venture, a new game, was revealed earlier this month as well. Since Mercenaries has appeared, there had been a call to once more play in the era during and after the clan invasion, the most important event in the history of the franchise. This call has been answered with the future arrival of Mechwarrior 5 clans. But what do we really know about this upcoming release? And is there anything that we know beyond that as well? So, with all of that said, let's talk a bit about what is on the horizon for Mechwarrior 5, as well as what lay beyond it. With the arrival of the Dragon's Gambit, Mechwarrior 5 Mercenaries now spends an enormous amount of time in the Inner Sphere. It starts in 3015, in career mode, and goes up until the War of 3039 in essence, in terms of finding scripted missions across the sandbox. Now, the core storyline is a bit tired in terms of its tropes, but the game's core narrative was built to be simple and straightforward when it was first implemented. After its launch, there were narrative mission chains added through DLC, which have been fairly well received, and these seem to be the basis of what is going to be coming after this title is completed. But, all the same, why are we talking about Mercenaries beyond the Dragon's Gambit? Well, it's simple, because it would appear that in Q1 2024, there should be one more DLC for this game. I'd assume it's the last DLC, which is meant to bridge the gap between the two games, and likely is not only meant to add one final content patch to Mechwarrior 5 Mercenaries, but will be used in some way to build hype for the next game which is coming, the standalone title of Mechwarrior 5 Clans. Overall, Mercenaries has had a mixed life. It was first released as an Epic Game Store exclusive, in a buggy state, but since its arrival on Steam, and eventually console, it's improved dramatically. People will mention often that mods somehow fixed the game, but truth be told, I don't really play with any mods, outside of a few visual ones. I think the game, in its vanilla state, is in a very good place. The sandbox element isn't my favorite part of it, admittedly, as I much prefer more meaningful missions and narratives, but the gameplay is just in a much better state than launch, and the DLCs have added much needed life to the game. I look forwards to whatever the last DLC for this title will be. So this is the big reveal which happened in September, as a result of PC Gamer magazine revealing it. Mechwarrior 5 Clans is the first time Mechwarrior has revisited the era since Mechwarrior 3, though it will be the first time players will sit in the cockpit of the clans in a narrative game since Mechwarrior 2. Clans Wolf and Jade Falcon were the primary playable clans in the original game, and Ghostbear was given its own very well-received expansion pack. Mechwarrior 2 would have a standalone expansion called Mercenaries, which I'd argue is one of the most beloved games in the history of the series. This time, things are flipped upon their head, with Mechwarrior 5 Mercenaries and its DLC expansions coming first, and then the major standalone title, Mechwarrior 5 Clans, being for the other side, And yes, to confirm, this will be a standalone title. It is not being tied to the original Mechwarrior 5, and it appears its campaign will be extensively reworked. Why is this? Because there is a much deeper focus on narrative battles, rather than procedurally generated encounters over reused maps. In other words, there will be at least some move towards the game being handcrafted in its encounters, much like the DLC mission packs. If the map is going to once more embrace a more open world as well, the theater of operation is going to be much smaller than it was in Mercenaries, which will still allow for a more detailed setting overall. There seems to also be a focus that some planets and battles may be used for several narrative conflicts too. Still, expect the game to be much more tightly focused on narrative missions, for a multitude of reasons. One of which is just the very short time period which the clan invasion takes place in, because in its original form it only goes from 3049 to 3052. Another significant point is that Clan Smoke Jaguar is going to be the primary clan which is played in this particular title, and for an older fan like myself, that's awesome. Ghostbear's Legacy's Mechwarrior 2, for older players, meant 3 of the 4 original invading clans got meaningful coverage. This time, finally, almost 30 years after its previous entry, yes, Clan Smoke Jaguar is getting its time in the sun. And not just to be shot down like in Mechwarrior 3 or the original Mech Commander, but as a playable faction. I just hope there isn't much of an attempt to make them better than what they were. I really appreciate Clan Smoke Jaguar for being the absolute bastards that they were. We know that people are going to be playing clan mechs, obviously, and the Stone Rhino was clearly designed to be inserted into this game as well, which is why it was attached to MWO first. As people know, I've come to greatly appreciate the Stone Rhino, so it's going to be awesome to fire one up in these games and just crush my enemies before me. We know the game is going to start with tutorial-styled missions in the Kerensky Cluster and maybe the Pentagon Worlds, before transitioning into the invasion. What's not certain so far is when the end date will be. Is it going to end with Luthien? Is it going to end with Tukiad? Will it end on Huntress and Stranomechty? It really depends on the scope of the game. Though this is speculation, I anticipate it's going to end on Luthien, or perhaps Tukiad, though the former is where Mechwarrior 2 Mercenaries ended, so I actually think that's more likely. Should the game do well, and I actually expect it to compared to its budget, I think we'll see DLC expansions for the game made, likely putting out campaigns for the other clans, like Jade Falcon, Ghostbear, and of course Wolf. This seems like the most plausible direction for the game to go. Overall, I'm excited for it. Genuinely. It's going to be awesome. The one regret I have is that I don't think there will be an Inner Sphere confrontation with the clans where we play from the Inner Sphere side of things. But honestly, after HPS Battletech and Mechwarrior 5 Mercenaries, it's okay for the clans to get their moment in the sun. Because I suspect after this game, they will be headed back towards the shade. Now why do I say that? Because there's going to be more Mechwarrior after Mechwarrior 5 clans. Or at least they are planned, as per Anab 7, the new parent company of Piranha Games. EN7 did display their business plans, and it appears that they have every intention, Microsoft permitting, of releasing new Mechwarrior games on a 3-year cycle. Now, before one begins jumping to any conclusions, there are a few important notes behind all of this. First, Mechwarrior 5 clans, I assume, would have to do well enough to justify a sequel. I think that is more than likely, but let's just get that out of the way first. Second, while the studio may aim for 3-year turnovers for games, that doesn't always, happen. Things could take 4 years, or perhaps even 4.5 years to reach market. A game may also be held back due to having a poor release window as well. So while it may be optimistic to hope for 2027 as a release, this follow-up game, this Mechwarrior 6 title, could arrive in 2028, or even in 2029 in theory. In other words, don't set your expectations too high. The next most important thing to mention is where will the game be set? I know many will cry out that they are tired of the clan invasion era or the FedCom Civil War, and that they want media to reach into the Blakest era, or even the Dark Age. And I have some bad news for you. Because Mechwarrior 5 recycled the designs and animations from MWO, and it is very likely that Mechwarrior 6 will do the same, even if things are cleaned up or animations are made smoother and more realistic. There may be higher resolution models for mechs used as well, but they'll be the same model in essence. You can't expect a major franchise artistic redesign, or a major change to in-game models outside of how detailed they are, based on the budgets these games are likely to receive. This also means that PGI will be incentivized to use models that they already have. So Mechwarrior 6 is probably not going to take place in the Blakest era, or especially the Dark Age. Not only are these eras too unreliable in terms of sales and interest. A quick reminder, MechAssault only moved 1 million boxes, and MechAssault 2 appears to have sold less than 500,000. At least from open and public sources that I could find. And these games encompassed the Blakest era, even if they were dreadful interpretations of it. Also, even if these numbers were higher, it's not going to be much higher in a meaningful sense. There is a reason why these titles were axed eventually, and AB7 themselves even implied their eagerness to make Mechwarrior 5 clans was to emulate the success of Mechwarrior 2, which is the most popular and profitable portion of the franchise. By the way, that's crazy to think about, isn't it? That even Mechwarrior 4, which did well, was not able to top what Mechwarrior 2 did. But what does all of this mean? This means Mechwarrior 6, if this is what the future title is called, is likely going to take place in the latter portion of the clan invasion, or the FedCom Civil War, where most of PGI's available and ready battle mechs can be implemented easily in-game, while adding a handful of new units to spice things up from time to time. I am by no means an oracle, of course, but it just seems very probable to me given the likely budgets of these projects, that they are going to reuse and refine many of their already existing assets, and they're going to try to capitalize on the popularity from the fanbase for these available time periods. This also means that if there is a Blakest or Dark Age era Mechwarrior game, the earliest it could arrive would be in 2030, and I suspect it would be longer than that too. The money's just not there, at least for development right now, especially when you look at the marketability and potential player demographics of these things. So, there will, provided Microsoft agrees to it, and provided Mechwarrior 5 Clans brings in enough revenue, be a future game. And after that, AB7 said that they will likely continue to make games every 3 years approximately, so long as there is a market for them. So this is great news. This will promote the tabletop game extensively, and it's going to create a great digital space for people to enjoy the franchise. Mechwarrior, as many of you know, is not the only part of the Battletech franchise in digital form. One of the most popular games out in recent years was in fact Battletech 2018. There have been calls for a sequel for some time, though unfortunately this appears, at least in my estimation, to be highly unlikely to happen. While the game was profitable, and Paradox did make money on it, it wasn't profitable enough, seemingly, to put more time and effort into an IP which Paradox did not actually own. This seems likely to be why HBS moved onto their own title following the release and success behind their biggest game. Paradox in recent years has gone from a beloved publisher, it should be noted, over to some weird, erratic creature, and one which is likely sitting on one of the biggest AAA mistakes in living memory, with whatever Vampire the Masquerade 2 ends up being, which is probably going to end up as being a complete debacle. But I digress. I don't see Battletech 2 coming anytime soon, either from a Paradox-aligned studio, like HBS, or anything else, unfortunately. But there are other historic Battletech titles which have been put into video game form, most notably the Mech Commander series. Sadly, I don't see Mech Commander making a stunning return either, if I'm honest. There hasn't been any stated interest, or any studio that seems to have plans for this. There is apparently a mod for Mechwarrior 5 to create something similar to Mech Commander, but I don't see a real-time tactical game making a return anytime soon either. The last component of the Battletech series digitally is MechAssault, which Microsoft itself actually may have some interest in reviving, but nothing is being worked on at this time. There is no studio being assigned to this task. What does that mean? It means that the Mechwarrior games are going to be the main focus of the property for the foreseeable future on digital platforms. It's literally what you see is what you get, until evidence comes of any kind of pivot or deviation. While that's a tad bit disappointing, especially on the HBS Battletech front, I'll take Mechwarrior 5 Clans, as well as any continuation of the franchise in digital form without a complaint or a problem. Let's just hope they meet expectations and deliver everyone an incredible experience. Also, just to be clear, Clan Smoke Jaguar did nothing wrong, and Turtle Bay was just a policing action. Thank you everyone for joining me here today. I just wanted to provide an update for people regarding what I was able to scrape through. There are more details provided about Mechwarrior 5 in the PC Gamer article in their paid-for subscription magazine, but these seem to be the most important components to stress. Beyond this, if you enjoyed this content, remember to hit like. If you're new here and you want more Battletech content, particularly lore and technical breakdowns, don't forget to subscribe. There's always more on the way. Next up after this is going to be an overview of the Dark Ages Phoenix Hawk L. A giant thank you to every one of the channel members who supported this channel directly as well. I also want to give a giant thank you to every channel member who supports this channel directly too. I've said it before and I mean it. This content is only made possible because of viewers like you. And with that, are you excited for the future of Battletech digitally? Let me know, because I will catch all of you in the comments section below.